Trucking route got cancelled 2 days early because of a jackknifed semi that shut down I-40 through Amarillo, and the dispatcher told me to deadhead home and take the reset. 6 weeks on the road. I'd been doing long haul since my daughter was 4 years old. She was 11 now, and every time I pulled back into our driveway on Sycamore Creek Road, I had this ritual. I'd sit in the cab for a minute before going inside, just letting the engine tick down, reminding myself that the man who walked through that door had to be different from the man who drove 16 hours straight through West Texas. I expected my daughter to be in the backyard. She liked to read out there in the evenings under the big sycamore that gave the road its name. I expected my second wife to be in the kitchen or on the couch with her phone. What I got was a house that felt like a held breath. My wife, we'd been married 14 months, answered on the third call. Her voice was flat in a way I'd learned to read like weather. "You're home early." Not "I missed you," not "that's great, I'll be right there." "You're home early," like an accusation. The root fell through. "Where's my daughter?" A pause, the kind that has weight to it. "She's at the Faith Horizon Youth Leadership Program, over in Millhaven. I told you about it." I thought back through 6 weeks of 10-minute calls from rest stops, through the white noise of diesel and wind. Maybe she had mentioned something, details blurred when you were living on coffee and counting miles. When did she leave? 3 weeks ago. She's doing wonderfully. The director says she has real leadership potential. I want to talk to her. They don't allow personal devices during the program. It's part of the immersive experience. You know how she is about her phone. This is actually good for her. Something tightened in my chest. Not panic yet, just the early edges of it. "Give me the address." "You'll disrupt everything. These kids are in the middle of a structured month and you showing up unannounced." The address. She gave it to me like she was doing me a favor she'd be repaid for later. A county road outside Millhaven, Tennessee, 45 minutes east. I didn't change clothes. I didn't eat. I got back in the cab. The drive out to Millhaven takes you through the kind of country that used to be farmland and is slowly becoming something else, subdivisions eating the edges, but the middle still all tobacco fields and old fence lines and sky that goes forever. I had the windows down because the AC smelled like something had died in the vents, and the hot August air came through like a wet blanket. The GPS took me off the state road and onto a county 2-lane, then off that onto a gravel track that climbed a low ridge. Faith Horizon Youth Leadership Academy was what the sign said, hand-painted on a board nailed to a post. The property behind it was substantial, maybe 40 acres, an old farmhouse that had been added onto in sections over the years. Several outbuildings and beyond them, descending the back of the ridge, rows of tobacco plants that stretched down to a tree line. It was almost 7 in the evening. The light was going orange. I parked and walked to the main house. A woman in her 40s answered the door. She had the kind of smile that sits on top of the face without touching anything underneath. "Can I help you?" "I'm here for my daughter, Lily." "Oh, our families don't usually visit during the program month. The immersive experience really requires." "I'm not visiting. I'm taking her home. Where is she?" The smile didn't move. "The children are finishing their evening responsibilities. If you wait in the sitting room, I can have Director Marsh come speak with you." I didn't want to wait in the sitting room. I wanted to find my daughter. But I also didn't know the layout of the property, and the woman was already stepping back, holding the door, and something in the practiced efficiency of it made me think that pushing past her right now would only make things harder. I waited 4 minutes. I know because I watched my phone. Director Marsh was a man about 60, with a grey beard trimmed close, and the handshake of someone who'd sold things his whole life. He wore khakis and a polo shirt with the Faith Horizon logo on the chest. A sunrise over 2 hands clasped together. "Mr. Voss, what a surprise. We love when parents take an active interest." "I want to see my daughter." Of course. She's just finishing up her evening work detail. The young people take real pride in contributing to the upkeep of the property. It's one of our core work detail. Character building responsibilities, Chores, essentially. Every great leader understands the dignity of labor. Something in the way he said it, too smooth, too prepared. Take me to her right now. His expression flickered. Just for a second, something calculating replaced the warmth, and then the warmth came back, thicker. Absolutely. Let me just radio ahead so she knows you're coming. We find that surprise visits can be disorienting for the young people when they're in the middle of the radio. We walk there now. He looked at me for a moment. I'm 6'2" and I've been loading and unloading freight since I was 23. I wasn't threatening him, I was just standing there, but I think he understood something about the distance between us. This way, he said. We went through the house and out the back and down a slope toward the tobacco fields. There were other adults stationed at intervals. I counted 3 before we'd gone 50 yards. Each of them tracked us without being obvious about it. The way they moved when they saw Marsh, slightly adjusting position, told me they were watching for a signal. The children were in the field. There were maybe 20 of them, spread across the rows, working in the last of the evening light. They wore long sleeves despite the heat. I found out later that was to protect from tobacco sickness, nicotine absorbed through the skin, which sounds like a reasonable precaution until you understand these were children who hadn't consented to be in a tobacco field in the first place. I found Lily in the 4th row. She had her hair pulled back under a bandana. She was moving slowly, methodically, with the specific kind of slowness that comes not from laziness, but from exhaustion so deep it's become normal. Her hands were stained dark at the fingertips and the heel of her palm from the tobacco leaves. Lily. She turned, and I saw her face, the sun damage that 3 weeks of August in a tobacco field does to an 11-year-old girl, the cracked lower lip, the hollows under her eyes. She looked at me like she was trying to make sure I was real. Then she started crying. Not the kind of crying that children do when they want something, the other kind. The kind that comes up from somewhere deeper. She ran to me and I caught her, and she held on so hard it hurt. Daddy, just that, just the word, over and over like she was testing it. I held the back of her head with my hand the way I used to when she was small. She was too thin. Even through the shirt I could feel it, the prominence of her shoulder blades. The absence of the soft roundness that was supposed to be there. When she could talk, she said, "They told me you knew I was here. They said you and Karen approved everything and that you didn't want me home until I learned how to act right." Karen was my wife. They said I had behavioral problems and this was what you both decided. They said if I was good enough and worked hard enough, maybe you'd let me come home before school started. I couldn't speak for a moment. Baby, I had to start again. That is not true. None of that is true. I just found out where you were. They said, I know what they said. They lied. You are going home right now. Marsh was beside me. Mr. Voss, I understand this is emotional, but Lily is here under a valid enrollment agreement that your wife signed. Removing her now would actually be in violation of. Stop talking. The agreement has legal standing. I'd hate for this situation too. I said stop talking. Other children in the rows had stopped working. They were watching. Some of them looked hopeful. One girl, maybe 9 years old, had moved to the end of her row and was watching with an expression I didn't have a word for then, but found one for later. Recognition, like she was watching something she'd been waiting for. A man came across the field toward us, younger than Marsh, heavyset, wearing the same polo. He stopped about 10 feet away with his arms loose at his sides. Mr. Voss, Marsh again, patient, reasonable. Let's all go back to the house and discuss this like adults. Lily can come with us. We'll sit down. I'll show you the documentation and we'll find a path forward that serves everyone. I picked Lily up. She wrapped her legs around me the way she used to when she was 6. She was too big for it, technically. I didn't care. I'm leaving, I said. Don't try to stop me. The heavy-set man moved to block the path to the house. I worked long-haul freight. I've hand-trucked refrigerators and equipment crates. And once, on a bad day in Flagstaff, a piano up 2 flights of stairs because the crew didn't show. I moved through the heavy-set man the way water moves through a narrow space, not with force exactly, but with a kind of committed mass that left no room for negotiation. He grabbed my arm. I shifted Lily to one side and turned in a way that removed his grip without hurting him. He grabbed again. This time I had less patience. I don't remember all of it clearly. There was shouting. Marsh on his radio. Another man coming from the direction of the outbuildings. Lily with her face against my neck, not making a sound, not loosening her grip. I was almost to the parking area when I heard the cruiser. It came up the gravel track with its lights on, no siren. A county sheriff's deputy got out. She was young, maybe 28, with the careful expression of someone who'd been cold to something she'd been given an incomplete picture of. Marsh was behind me now, breathing harder than he'd been before, his smooth voice back in place. Deputy Harnett, thank goodness, this man has assaulted 2 of my staff members and is attempting to remove a child from our care without authorization. Deputy Harnett looked at me. She looked at Lily, who had lifted her head from my shoulder when she heard the car. She looked at the tobacco field behind us, where children were still visible in the rows. Sir, I'm going to need you to set the child down. No, ma'am. I kept my voice level. This is my daughter. Look at her hands. Look at her face. She's been working in that field for 3 weeks. I want you to look at those other children. Deputy Harnett looked at the field. She was quiet for a long moment. Sir, what's your name? Miles Voss. This is my daughter Lily. She's 11. She looked at Marsh. Director Marsh, I'm going to need to see the premises. Certainly, Deputy, but you'll want a warrant for a full inspection. Our residents have privacy rights that. I've got probable cause looking at me from that field. Her voice hadn't changed tone at all, which made it more effective, not less. I'm asking nicely. What happened after that took 4 hours and felt like 20. Deputy Harnett called for backup. 2 more deputies arrived, then someone from the Tennessee Department of Children's Services. Marsh tried to present paperwork, and some of it looked legitimate at first glance. Enrollment agreements, program descriptions, liability waivers, the kind of documents that assume you won't read closely. One of the staff members tried to leave through a back gate with a briefcase. That was when things changed in tone. The outbuilding that looked like a barn was where the children slept. Bunks, 16 to a room, no air conditioning, 1 bathroom for 23 kids. The DCS worker's face when she came back out was a specific shade of gray I've only seen a few times in my life. Lily and I sat on the tailgate of my truck while the property was processed. She'd stopped shaking, but she hadn't let go of my hand. I kept looking at her profile. The peeling sunburn across her nose. The way her shoulders curved in like she was still bracing for something. How long before they let us go? She asked. Not long. Are you hungry? I'm always hungry. I had a bag of beef jerky and some crackers in the cab, trucker food, the kind of thing I'd have apologized for under normal circumstances. She ate like she hadn't had real food in days, which it turned out was accurate. The program fed the children twice daily, oatmeal in the morning, rice and beans in the evening. Lunch in the field was a piece of bread and water. A paramedic checked her over. Mild dehydration, early stage heat exhaustion, hands abraded from tobacco work, nothing permanent. The paramedic said that last part twice, like he was trying to convince himself as much as me. She needs proper food and rest, he said, and a doctor's follow-up in the next couple of days, but she's going to be okay. I nodded. I couldn't say anything. The DCS worker, a woman named, she told me, though I've never been good with names in stressful situations, came to talk to us around 9:30. There were 23 children on the property. Ages range from 8 to 14. 12 of them had been there for the full 6-week program, which wasn't a leadership academy in any meaningful sense. It was a contracted labor operation. Marsh had agreements with 2 agricultural businesses in the county. The children picked tobacco, harvested vegetable crops on an adjoining property, and did maintenance and cleaning work at a commercial facility 3 miles down the road. The parents had been told they were sending their kids to a faith-based leadership and character development program. The enrollment fee was $300. Some parents had paid more for what Marsh called the enhanced track. My wife had paid $500. Karen arrived at the property around 10 p.m. She'd driven out when I stopped answering her calls. She looked at the scene, the cruisers, the DCS workers, the children being interviewed in the farmhouse, and I watched the understanding move across her face in stages. "I didn't know," she said. "You signed the paperwork." It looked like a summer program. Director Marsh came to our church. He gave a whole presentation. He had testimonials, photos of the kids on retreats, a whole. "You sent my daughter to pick tobacco." I didn't know. I believed her. That made it harder in some ways and easier in others. Karen hadn't been malicious. She'd been convinced the way people get convinced by people who are very good at convincing. She'd also genuinely believed that Lily needed structure. Our daughter had been struggling since her mother died 4 years earlier, and Karen didn't know how to reach her, and I wasn't home enough to try. And Marsh had handed her a solution wrapped in the language of faith and leadership, and she'd taken it without asking the questions she should have asked. That didn't mean Lily had to forgive her. That part wasn't up to me. Director Marsh was arrested that night, him and 2 of his senior staff. The charges took a while to fully develop. That's how these things work. Everything has to be built carefully so it holds in court. But when the indictments came down 6 months later, they were federal: labor trafficking of minors, child endangerment, wire fraud, and several counts related to the financial structure of the operation, which turned out to be larger than I'd understood. Faith Horizon wasn't one property. It was 4 in 3 states, 112 children over the past 7 years. The tobacco operation alone had generated over $2 million in contracted labor revenue. Marsh got 38 years. He was 61 when he was sentenced. His attorney argued his age and his health. The judge noted the ages of the children. Karen and I separated before the trial concluded. It wasn't a dramatic thing. We both knew, I think, that we'd been holding something together with the wrong materials, and the weight had finally found all the weak points. She was never charged with anything. The DA determined she'd been genuinely deceived, but the guilt stayed on her in a way I could see every time we were in the same room. That kind of guilt doesn't make for easy company. I signed the divorce papers in March and moved with Lily to a smaller house in a different school district. Lily started therapy that September. Her therapist was a woman who specialized in trauma and worked out of a small office above a hardware store in our new town, which Lily found funny in a dark way. Trauma therapy above a nail and screw shop, real subtle. She had her mother's sense of humor, dry and sideways, and it was one of the first things to come back, long before the nightmares stopped, long before she could be in an enclosed space without checking for exits. For 2 months, she wouldn't go outside if the weather was hot. She'd stand at the window and look at the yard and then go back to her room. I didn't push it. Her therapist said not to push it. She also stopped reading for a while. Books had been her whole world before. She'd go through 2 or 3 a week, fantasy novels mostly, the thick ones with maps at the front, and after the program she just stopped. I'd find her sitting in her room not doing anything, which was more alarming than if she'd been doing something wrong. Then one Saturday in November, she came downstairs with a book, an old one she'd read before, the spine cracked from previous reads. She sat on the couch and opened it and read for 3 hours without moving. I made lunch and left it beside her, and she ate it without looking up. I don't think I've ever been so relieved by something so small. The following spring, Lily's school had an event, one of those community showcases where kids present projects, and her class was doing a unit on local history. Lily chose to research the history of child labor in Tennessee, specifically the tobacco farming industry in the early 20th century. She built a display board with photographs and a written report. Her teacher sent me an email saying it was the most thorough submission in the class and asking if Lily would want to present it at a county-level history fair. I asked Lily if she wanted to. She thought about it for a couple of days. Then she said yes. The history fair was held at the county library. Lily stood next to her display board for 2 hours explaining the history to adults who stopped and asked questions. I stood at a distance and watched her. She was matter-of-fact about it, the way people are when they've processed something enough that it no longer controls their reactions. She'd found a way to take what happened to her and connect it to something larger, something that had happened to other children long before her. And in doing that, she'd made it into something she could stand next to instead of something that stood over her. A woman, older, maybe 70, stopped at the display for a long time. She spoke to Lily quietly. Lily spoke back. The woman put a hand on Lily's arm, gentle, and Lily didn't flinch. Afterward, I asked what they'd talked about. She said her grandfather worked tobacco as a kid. Back in the 30s. She said it was hard, but there wasn't much choice then. What did you say? I said there's always a choice for the people making the decision. The kids don't get to choose. The woman had gotten a little teary, Lily said. I understood why. By the time Lily was 14, she testified in a civil suit brought by 17 families against the entities that had contracted with Faith Horizon for labor. She gave her deposition in a conference room downtown with her attorney and mine and 2 people from the opposing side. She spoke for an hour and a half. She didn't cry. She was precise and specific. And when the opposing attorney tried to suggest that the children had misunderstood their situation, she looked at him with an expression that I recognized. It was the expression her mother used to make when someone said something that didn't merit a long response and said, I was 11. I understood exactly what was happening. I just didn't know how to make it stop. The civil suit settled for $4.2 million distributed among the families. Our share covered Lily's therapy and educational expenses through college and then some. I didn't touch the rest. Lily said she wanted to decide what to do with it when she was older and understood better what she needed. That seemed right to me. I still drive long haul. Different runs now. I took a regional contract that keeps me within a day's drive of home, shorter rotations, home every week or 10 days. It costs about $12,000 a year in income compared to what the cross-country runs were paying. I've never once thought it wasn't worth it. The last time I drove past the Millhaven exit on I-40, Lily was with me. She was 15 then, summer break, and she'd asked to ride along on a short run, 300 miles up and back, a delivery to a distribution center in Cookeville. She likes trucks in a way that surprised me. The size of them, the view from up high, the logic of loading and weight distribution. We passed the exit, and she looked at the sign. You okay? I asked. Yeah, a pause. It's just a sign. It is. She looked out the window as the exit passed behind us, and then she put her feet up on the dash the way she always does, despite me telling her it's a bad habit, and she opened her book. Another thick fantasy novel. A different series now. She'd burned through several, and she read for the next 100 miles while I drove. That's the image I come back to. My daughter with her feet on the dash and her nose in a book, comfortable in the cab of a truck that smells like diesel and old coffee, the Tennessee hills going by in the late afternoon light. I'd come home early that August evening because a jackknifed semi had shut down the highway. Random, mechanical, nothing to do with any plan or instinct. The highway department cleared it the next afternoon and the route ran again like nothing had happened. But I'd been on my way home when it happened, and so I went home, and so I found her. I've thought about that a lot since. All the things that didn't have to happen but did. All the things that could have gone differently and didn't. The parent I was before that night. Half present, making promises I stretched thin across too many miles. And the parent I've tried to be since. I didn't get it right the first time. I'm not sure I always get it right now. But I show up. Whatever else I do or don't do, I show up. And when Lily looks up from her book and says, "Hey Dad, are we stopping for food soon? I'm starving," the ordinary, unremarkable, completely perfect normalcy of that question, I think that's what it means to have gotten her back. Not just from that field, from all of it. From the version of our lives where I was always somewhere else, where she was always waiting. She's not waiting anymore. She knows I'm here. That's enough. That's everything. I think about cause and effect a lot more than I used to. Not in any mystical sense, just the plain mechanics of it. A jackknifed semi on I-40 shuts down a highway. A dispatcher calls a driver home 2 days early. A father pulls into a driveway instead of a truck stop in Amarillo. And a little girl in a tobacco field gets found before the summer ends. None of it was planned. All of it mattered. What I've come to understand, sitting with this story for 3 years now, is that what happened to Lily wasn't just the result of one bad man running one bad program. It was the result of a chain of smaller failures that started well before Director Marsh ever handed anyone a brochure. I was gone too much. I told myself it was for her, for the bills, for the future, and some of that was true. But some of it was also easier than being present for a grieving 11-year-old who looked too much like her mother and needed more from me than I knew how to give. Karen signed papers she didn't read closely enough because she was trying to solve the problem I'd handed her. March existed because vulnerable families are easier to deceive than intact ones, and he understood that before any of us did. That's the cause and effect that doesn't get talked about enough. Predators don't create vulnerability. They find it. They look for the gaps. The absent parent. The overwhelmed step-parent. The child who's been told in 100 small ways that she's difficult. And they offer to fill those gaps with something that looks like structure and opportunity. The cost of that offer only becomes visible later in a tobacco field, in a child who's forgotten how to read for pleasure, in a girl who checks for exits before she sits down in a room. What pulled Lily through wasn't luck, though luck was part of it. It was something I watched her build piece by piece over 2 years of therapy and hard mornings and history fair projects, and one very long deposition. She had to figure out, at 11 and 12 and 13, what kind of person she was going to be after something like that. And she decided, not all at once, but gradually, in the way real decisions actually get made, that she was going to be someone who understood what happened to her well enough to explain it to other people. That takes a kind of moral seriousness that I don't think I had at her age. Knowing right from wrong is one thing. Being willing to stand next to your own painful experience and say this is what it was, and this is what it was. And this is what it means. That's something harder and rarer. She also had to stay smart about it. Not just intelligent, she'd always been that, but clear-eyed about the way the world actually works, about how paperwork gets used as a weapon, about how language like character development and leadership potential can be a wrapper around something ugly. She learned to ask the questions that sound rude but aren't. Where exactly? Can I call any time? Who else will be there? She taught me to ask them too. And she didn't quit. That's the part I come back to most. In those 2 months when she wouldn't go outside and wouldn't read and sat in her room doing nothing, she was still doing something. She was deciding underneath all of it that she wasn't going to let that field be the last word on who she was. That took more strength than anything I've ever done behind the wheel of a truck. I didn't save Lily because I was a particularly good father. I saved her because I came home early on a random Tuesday in August. The difference between those two things used to keep me up at night. Now I try to use it differently, as a reminder that showing up consistently and early, and even when it's inconvenient, is the only insurance any of us actually have. She knows I'm here now. That's not a small thing. That's the whole thing.